that when I'm talking and when, if perchance I'm actually holding and demonstrating something, that the trainees are front and center. So you're the special ones today. So, well, that she had checked out this. Is this the file?
Yeah.
So Jeannie said, just for my benefit, she said, I checked where the rattlesnake usually hangs out and it wasn't there. So about rattlesnakes, they're they show what we call site fidelity. So in radio tracking studies with rattlesnakes, it basically, the life of an adult rattlesnake is they will stake out various places where rodents live, and they'll spend days. They're a sit and wait predator for the most part. And so they might only go, 30 meters this way and then 2 weeks there, then 30 meters this way and 2 weeks there. So this is a spot where there's one or more rattlesnakes. It's kind of, that's his or her zone. And that's why Jeannie said she checked it out and hadn't seen it. It's there. It's kind of cool right now, and I'm not going to go flipping rocks over to find it. But just so you know, there's just this, that not all snakes are like that. Rattlesnakes are particularly site faithful. So,
and would there be a couple of rattlesnakes in the same pile of rocks?
There can be. There's a spot that we might go by up the road here, which I think is a maternal colony. Rattlesnakes have been studied in a couple different species and been shown that the females, once a female is gravid, once she's mated, why risk your life going out and crawling around and hunting if you can already nourish those young that are inside of you? So females tend to go to areas where they can get warm without being exposed to predators. Places like a pile of boulders where the rocks are warm and the sun is coming into the crevice that you're in, and they basically hang out there, and then they tend to disperse to give birth to their young, so the young aren't dispersing from the place where the maternal colony is. And we also now know that rattlesnakes, very, very often, the female actually stays with her young, sometimes for a period of several weeks. So, they're not just the spawn of the devil, they're actually really good mommies. So it's sort of a unique thing about rattlesnakes. But yeah?
That means that she's a mama because there were two or three little babies hanging with her.
How many days ago?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, this is we're late in the season, so this is young of the year season. Dang.
Yeah. Sorry.
I want to go take a quick.
Pictures.
Okay. Very, very good. Probably, yeah, that's her husband, yeah. All right, so guide me on to snakes. Very, very, very often go into holes to look for prey. So these holes right here were almost certainly, I will pretty much promise you, were made by pocket gophers. When you have a controlled burn and you can see the mounds, you realize just the density of pocket gophers here. Pocket gophers are extremely active. They have a burrow system that is close to the surface and a burrow system that is down below. And they're constantly making new burrows. So these burrows are home to almost all the animals we've talked about in this class and in the amphibian class. The snakes, except with a couple of exceptions, do not make burrows, okay? We don't have any North Americans that actually do it. But snakes use the holes of other animals. So even if you find a hole that's that big around, and it looks like a snake hole, it's probably a shrew or something like that. Those are the small hole burrow makers that we have around here. But yeah, pocket gophers are great food for rattlesnakes and for gopher snakes and for king snakes. And also, like I said, great shelter for everybody else, particularly when the wet season comes and animals can get into the unoccupied, deeper tunnel system of the pocket gophers. So, if a snake is down in a sort of a matrix of tunnels that a gopher has made, sure, there might be a lot of water that gets in there, but it's not like going to fill up right away. Okay, and there's usually a part of a burrow system like this that where the water is draining below it and it stays dry.
Okay.
Believe me, there's an awful lot of life down there during the wet season that doesn't want to drain.
Baby snake.
Yeah, what?
A bird or something? Oh, wow. And it was a fully intact, soft, squishy, almost lifelike baby gopher snake.
Aww.
And then this is like 2 days later.
Yeah.
You brought it out here and put it out here, and this is
No, I left it where I just moved it off the driveway.
So 2 days later, what ate all this? Boy, it's hard to say.
I was thinking,
Carrion beetles,
Yeah.
and just a lot of different scavenger type things would get it, but it doesn't look like it.
the plate around? so
look at all the little
everyone
ants.
can
Maybe they're eating it.
Oh, my God, those are solenopsis. It's one of the smallest ants we have. One thing that you can do with these guys is because the soil here is soft, I'll put my hand right there.
Get it.
It's gonna hide. Where's it gonna hide?
Under your hand.
Here, okay. I've been staring at the lizard for 5 minutes. So.
You gotta be real. As soon as you think you might get the tail, you let go. So
Big fence lizard.
it's a juvenile fence lizard. So I'm going to talk about noosing. I have a couple different nooses with me, but these are really hard to noose because they're so light that even the light dental floss doesn't tend to close enough around their heads. So, like I was saying, these guys are going to be in the trail, all the clear areas, dashing off to the side. But because it's cool, this one was hiding under a rock, right? So we'll talk a little bit about technique and stuff, but it would have been really easy to crush this animal if you just basically didn't think about how to roll this rock when you rolled it. So here, just in case we don't catch another lizard, I want to show you something. So it's really neat to let the kids touch the lizard, but it's kind of nice. So what I'm doing right now is this is how I hold the animal so that everybody can see it, and it is not going to hurt itself by struggling. So right now I have its femur between the tip of my index finger and my thumb, and because it's really small, I have the humerus is basically also being lightly compressed there. But this is just, you can see the animal. I'm not, this is not a good way to talk about it, but this is sort of a skill you have to sort of practice. Depending on the size of the lizard, this is a hard one to do because he's so small. Depending on the size of the lizard, your positioning is going to be quite different. But anyway, once you've got it like this, I'll forget the fact that this is a baby. You can let the kids touch it. This one doesn't feel very spiny. So this is in a family of lizards called the spiny lizards. When they're young, their scales feel much more granular. But a couple cool things about looking at the juveniles. Okay, when you turn them over, number one, I told you before, you can tell if they're a boy or a girl, even though we won't see color or anything else like that. But this animal is young enough that we might be able to see its belly button. So I'm going to hold it behind the head like that, and I can. So, trainees, take a look. This is a female. I don't see the large scales. It does have some color on it, but do you see that little scar right there?
Kind of.
That's where the yolk was attached.
Right in the middle of its belly.
Right where your belly button would be. It's a little linear slit.
I did.
The younger they are, the more obvious it is. Just above the vent.
Okay.
So this animal was inside of this animal was inside of the egg, and it was being nourished completely by the yolk inside of that breathing egg. And yeah, I'll try to hold it still for the photographers, but I am going to try to show it to everybody.
Cool.
Yeah, but it doesn't have enlarged scales behind its vent, so this is always going to be a little girl. There are animals that change sex as they age, anyway. But this animal hasn't lost any part of its tail yet. Hopefully, we'll catch an adult because there isn't quite as much to say about these guys. But yeah, just the fact that this isn't much bigger than a large grasshopper, so even bluebirds and phoebes will take these guys. So there's an awful lot of predators that aren't normally lizard predators that this animal. Ooh, I'm not holding a femur right there. Anyway, that this animal here is vulnerable to. But anyway, once you get the animal to where you can control it like this, then it's okay for the kids to touch it. But if it's well, hopefully we'll catch another one. But yeah, it's really important for them to be able to feel the scales and to feel in the other way so they actually catch.
Can I feel?
And yeah. Have you ever felt a lizard before?
No, I don't touch these
A lot
things.
of people who
It's soft.
So feel how smooth it is. We'll compare it. The third eye is really hard to see an animal this small. So do you guys carry magnifying lenses?
Yeah.
So you would use that lens maybe to show off the belly button, maybe to show off the fact that it doesn't have the two scales, but there's a little dot in the middle of the top of its head that's the third eye. And I'm just going to say that if I am here for the rest of the day and I don't catch an adult lizard, I don't deserve to teach this class. Okay, so one really, really important thing with all the animals that we catch is where do you let it go? Exactly where you found it. So it was under that rock, right? This is kind of obvious, but I'm talking to you like I'm talking to a bunch of 8-year-olds. So should I roll the rock back and put the lizard there and roll the rock back on?
You'll squish it.
No. Generally speaking, you pretty much leave the rock. It looks like this rock's been turned a number of times, but this is about where it was this time. So you basically turn the rock back over and you let the lizard see the dark area, and it goes right back to where it was. And there he goes. Now everything's good. And then I would tell them, don't step on the rock. I mean, literally sometimes they just do it. It's not like they're mean. It's not like they're mean. It's just, you know, these kids are full of energy. They're bouncing around and stuff. So don't step on the rock. And now that lizard's okay.
It seems like the animal really calmed down a little bit once you were holding firmly. Is that sort of a rule of thumb that a lot of the animals, if you're holding them correctly, will?
That animal was not at its optimum body temperature. So actually, once, even with an adult, if I'm holding it just right, it's a hard thing to teach. There's a certain, you want to restrain the animal just enough. And so they basically do sort of calm down. But no matter how I roll this, you know, I could hurt an animal. So if it's too heavy for me to move, I'm not going to move it. I'm not going to demonstrate this. If you start to move something and it moves slightly and then you release, the animal may have moved when you released it. So be really careful about that first. If it resists enough that you think you hurt your back or you can't pick it up, don't pick it up. So for something like this, first of all, how many kids do you have at a time?
4.
You have 5 or so. Okay, and there's sort of this general rule that we'll just practice, is that you turn things toward yourself in a place where there might be a rattlesnake so that it's less likely that the snake is not so much just going to strike it reflexively, but then it's going to go into among the legs of the kids that are going to go like this. So 5 of the trainees, they come over here, or as many, like 3 or 4, but engage them in this moment. Okay, this moment is, all right, you know, let's see what's under here, why there could be anything. And, you know, anyway, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it onto my toe, right? And that's
to pick it up instead of letting it.
Just do that. See, there's all grass under there, so there wasn't likely to be somebody. But I guess I could have crushed somebody there, now that I think about it. But basically, I minimized the amount of surface area I was going to be just sort of crunching over here. And then, we'll talk about this again, you put things back exactly as you found them. There's nothing worse than coming to a place where, you know, some geocachers are really bad, have come and flipped everything over and left them flipped over, because you saw how that microhabitat underneath the other one was very different than what was surrounding it. That's really important to why these animals are there and what, you know, keeps them happy there. Food. There's good exposure for animals, for lizards to bask. There are places for things to hide underneath. There's certainly pocket gophers here. There might be ground squirrels in a place like that. But this is just kind of a good spot for a lot of different things. And in this case, I'll do this sort of on my own, but I have objects that I can be pretty sure that I can turn and get a look. See, that hasn't been in that place for a long time. Anyway, that I can turn and see if any of our subject matter is readily available. This is too heavy for me to turn, so I'm not going to. That was moved from somewhere else. But the other thing is, it's really cold and everything, so I might have scanned this log to see if there was a lizard basking, so that I would know how to approach it. But yeah, it's going to get warmer. It's a ticks and Lyme disease thing. So a lot of people, when you take them out and it's like, okay, it's time for lunch, they're like, where are we going to sit?
Exactly. I was thinking.
And almost everybody will choose to sit on a log or sit on a rock before they'll sit in the grass. So studies have shown that the most frequent place that nymphal Ixodes ticks, those are the Lyme disease vector ticks, hang out is on mossy trunks, logs, and rocks. And the nymphs, because the lizards are the ones that are vaccinating the nymphs are the most, in the population of ticks, the ones that are in Marin County or Sonoma County, the highest infection rate is in nymphal ticks. So the worst place you can sit is on a log, or especially a mossy one or a mossy rock, or lean against a mossy tree trunk, because that's where they find their lizards. And also that's where they can sort of get out of the sun if they're only, they're only a half a millimeter long. So you're not as vulnerable on something like that. I'm talking about, this isn't really mossy enough, but I just want you all to know that not just for your, but yeah, that would be a bad place to sit for lunch. And it's one of the most destructive things you can do because once you pull the bark off, even if you put it back, you've ruined that microhabitat. So, and kids will naturally do that. So if the piece is loose, yeah, that's none of this came from. But yeah, discourage peeling of bark. Yeah, old books like, maybe even the book I have with me, that it's 40, 50-year-old book, he might even say look under bark. He's a beautiful man, but those were old school techniques. Anyway, first look, you don't see something that was buried in the substrate. And then I really am careful before I put it down because, you know, even a small beetle doesn't want the whole weight of this rock down. Oh, here's another thing. There's a practice sometimes of being careful about crushing things by doing this. But you just changed the microhabitat. You now ventilated something that shouldn't be ventilated. So check it for animals. Don't let your animal go under it, but don't block it. So I'm gonna, if I can move the object with one hand, I'm gonna be ready with my right hand. And again, nobody home. Nobody home there. Some insects though. Volcanic. This. So lizards are like birds. They don't urinate. So bird poop is usually got some black stuff and some white stuff, right? So this is a lizard poop, and so if I crumble it in my hand, and I take my magnifying glass, which unfortunately I didn't bring my bigger magnifying glass, I just have my entomologist 15X. You can see that, do you guys carry lenses? I have a handful of insect parts. I have I can recognize one of the abdominal pinchers of an earwig here, and this is a pretty small frass pellet. But then the white stuff,
You want to put it in here?
you really have to have pretty good magnification to see what I got there. But anyway, so this white stuff, so urine has a lot of nitrogenous waste, urea, and so it basically comes out as a dry pellet because these guys are very good, their kidneys are very efficient at metabolizing water rather than just excreting it if you're going to live in a habitat like this. So they do drink, sometimes they'll lap water up, but generally speaking they get their moisture from the food they're eating. So the fact that we found the lizard poop here means that a lizard could be under rock number 3, but I'm not sure I can move that without, yeah. That's something, if I tried to move that, I would really disturb whatever it was, and I might very well, really fancy tools. You all can make nooses too, but because I am always out hunting for these animals, I have, oh shoot. So this noose is something from my last trip to the desert. So it's actually engineered for catching Chuck Wallace. Well, you'll see the size of this.
We may not see one of those here today.
You might not. All right, so a noose is basically, where all the training is here. So a noose is basically, I have a fixed loop here, which gives me a slip knot. Right, so this is the lizard, and this is a super small lizard, but I just want to demonstrate technique because we're not seeing much. So it's a really small lizard, so I'm going to open up the opening of my noose to be about, oh God, not even that big. See how I'm, so this is the tape dental floss. Then I'm going to pull out my, let me whip this out. Anyway, and because I have so much line, that was so I could make a great big, huge noose. I'm just going to shorten it so I don't get too much degree of difficulty from the breeze. And now, so there's a little lizard, actually there was, lizards can hear. So I may have
Scared him off.
Oh my goodness, he's not where he was. But if I walk in that direction, oh man, after all that. And so what's more dangerous, this or that? Okay, so generally speaking, I'm going to approach, I don't see a lizard, I'm just going to say, I'm going to approach, oh, there it is.
There he is. He
Really
moved.
small-
Yeah.
really small guy.
He's on the right
And I'm
side.
just going to take a couple steps and stop, then I'll take another couple more steps and stop. And now I'm actually close enough to catch that animal, and I want to bring my noose up sort of behind him, but I'm not going to sweep it right in. I'm just going to stop, and he sees it. So I'll move it over here and stop again. Oops. Yeah, these baby guys are the hardest. All right, so quickly, let me tell you something. If I did this to you, you would die. I would hang you and you would strangle. This animal here, now this might not work because it's a baby. This animal right here is so light that it doesn't, there's no crushing of its windpipe. So this, don't worry about what size this animal is. This is what I do. First, I set it on my leg or on my arm like this. Usually I'm down low. And now I say, don't touch it. Because now I can talk about it. And one thing that I will say, even with this little, well, this little guy's not going to do it very much, is if this was an adult, I would say, notice what color it is, okay? Because it's going to change color while we have it. And that's because it's scared. It's going to get lighter because it's going to warm up, and it's going to get brighter. Like all of the pigment cells are going to start lighting up. And even this little guy is going to get lighter while he's here. So this is while you talk about it. So this is a baby western fence lizard. It came out of an egg. This guy probably came out of an egg a couple weeks to a month ago. And he's already eating insects. And he's looking out for every predator in the world, blah, 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 blah. And he's let him know, you can't, well, I'll let you touch it, but I'm going to have to get it out of the noose first. Because if I try to touch it while it's in the noose, it's going to struggle. And it could hurt itself. But I just have a little lizard on a leash right now. So basically what you want to do, where is this guy? Is you want to carefully just compress the body. Now, small lizard or big lizard, this technique is the same. So my noose, as you might have noticed, it looked like I didn't trim it neatly enough, but I did that on purpose. So my noose has this little tail on it. And the tail is so I can do that. I can just slip it off of his head, because I can't get my fingernail underneath there. So we have...
He's a squirmy little guy.
He's a very squirmy little, he's a squirmy little something. That's his cloaca. He's actually everting his cloaca right now. And I'm seeing this is her again. There's another her. See the belly button right there?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's where the yolk was attached. Anyway, and that's just another little element of, this animal is just like us. It has eyes, it's got a skull, it's got ribs, it's got lungs. You know, we're all animals. I mean, that's one of the things, I can't do your insect class, but ask a kid, is this an animal? No. And like, I don't know, we're animals too. Anyway, but I just like to impress upon them that we have a lot in common with this little critter right here. And anyway, we already did this. You let them touch it and stuff like that. And because this is a youngster, we don't have ticks to show them. I can't show them femoral pores. But so far today, we've only seen youngsters, so I got to demo the noose with that. But we'll let this underneath your feet. And then that gets them stepped on. So you kind of want to be careful about where you direct them. I mean, you're not working with big groups, but just be aware of that. The animal could sprint into the group. So try to, generally speaking, if the group is gathered around the rock where you found it, have the kids back up first, and then do what I did before. But this guy was out in the open, so I'll give him this as his home rock. And I'll say for photographers, if you want an in situ photo, a lot of times when you first release an animal, you can get your in situ more. We can sit and we can quietly watch them, and we'll learn more about them by doing that. And if the lizards haven't done anything in 3 minutes with kids that age, you get up and go find another lizard. But generally speaking, one of each thing, and it keeps the boys. Do you ever let the kids race ahead of you?
No.
Yeah, you're lucky. I work with bigger groups. But yeah, you're the one that says, stop, there's a lizard. And then everybody come and watch it. And then you can tell them the 3 facts that you didn't tell them on the last lizard. Actually, trying to catch a lizard, you want to keep your voice down and not talk while you're actually trying to noose it. But what's kind of cool is snakes can't hear airborne sounds. So a rattlesnake has never really heard his own rattle. But snakes' jaws are basically on the ground. And if you look at your jaw, it goes right up into where your ear is. And so there's a lot of information transmitted into the, they still have the ability to hear, but the sounds are transmitted from their body contact and from their jaw contact on the ground. So they can hear us, feel us coming, right? And they can also respond, I've overgeneralized, they can respond to very deep sounds that actually make things vibrate. So they do hear sounds, but generally speaking, they're not going to hear me talking like this. It's just an interesting difference to point out to the kids. The bounty isn't going to be quite as great, so a lot of these animals probably had to move on. They didn't die in the fire, but probably had to move on. That trail, we'd head up into a cooler climate. We'd head up into a drier climate, a cooler climate with a lot more shade. And so, down here, we're thinking rattlesnake, gopher snake, fence lizard. Up in there, northern alligator lizard and western skink are going to be common. You're more likely to get your ringneck snakes up in more of the forested area. Any of these animals can go into either zone. I'm just talking about likelihoods. And that list I just gave you is kind of the cast of common characters. So don't put all your time into studying, Western skinks, although they're relatively common, you won't have them in your hand. Learn everything you want to know about Western fence lizards because you're going to see them. And I don't know how often y'all see gopher snakes around here, but they're probably pretty common. Is this a 2016 model or 2017 model? Now we can't be sure. And everybody wants to know how old is that animal. But I'm going to say that, so these animals, the first hatchlings that I would see probably here, I would guess the last week of June. And then through July and August, you just keep seeing them. We're seeing newly born animals. But this guy right here, because we had a really productive year in terms of rain and bugs and stuff like that, most of the young from last year are already bigger than this. So I can also check to see if there's still evidence of a yolk scar. There is a little tiny yolk scar there, see it? Mm-hmm. And this, let me see if this looks like another, we haven't caught a male yet. You have to look pretty closely sometimes. Another female. But yeah, pretty much the same idea. A little bigger, but this is probably a 2017 model, but mom laid the eggs earlier, maybe in a better place, and it's already gotten successfully fat on insect prey this year. All right?
Ticks up.
It's old enough to have ticks. It's big enough to have ticks. This one looks clean though. Thanks for reminding me. And I believe its home rock is right there. Salmonella. In fact, a lot of them do, and I would guess even most of them do. We might even have background levels of salmonella with us all the time. There are more organisms living inside of us than the number of cells in our bodies. I guess that factoid's gotten out there. So when you handle these animals, sometimes they'll poop on you. I actually had some cloacal excreta on me and stuff like that. You do want to be careful with it. But what I want to say about salmonella is it sort of came to the fore with captive turtles. So a captive turtle is swimming in its own fecal matter, and I used to be a zookeeper. There are a lot of what we call diseases of stress or diseases of captivity. So if I caught that baby lizard, or any lizard, and I just kept it captive, and I kept it in stressful conditions, I could swab it when I caught it, and I might get what we call background salmonella. We'll get all kinds of bacteria. But even if it came out clean with the swab that we did, 2 weeks later, I might swab it and have raging salmonella in it. So it's out there. You want to be careful with it, but you don't want to be paranoid about it. But if you're working with kids, you always want to have, if you're going to pick up, oh my goodness, I forget my prop.
Oh no.
He had one.
Yeah, you want these, right? So just because you want to have the sanitary thing, you want to be able to have something with which, the Purell that you pour on your hands are okay, but this stuff actually works better, especially if you get a garter snake that's just stunk up some kid's arm before lunch. But I'll say this with the amphibian class, you want to be really careful. You got to wash your hands off with water after washing them off with this. But it is good to carry these things. But, if you get pooped all over by a snake, do the parents ever come along? You guys don't have to do that.
Yeah,
Oh, they do? Yeah. You might get a parent that's going to start talking the salmonella thing. So just say that these wild animals are very, very unlikely to make you sick. They're a lot cleaner than the roast beef in that sandwich you're about to eat. Insects have basically worked their way through this, and where are they now? Unfortunately, this carcass has been moved, but for the most part, the flies and the beetles and the flies and the flies and the other flies and the beetles the larvae have consumed as much as they can, and then they burrow into the soil. So there's a lot of insects around the carcass, even after the carcass is clean. And if there's a lizard nearby, a lot of times you'll see the big daddy of them all just sitting right out there in bug land. But carcasses are sometimes a very good place for the food chain to be observed, especially if the carcass hasn't been moved, and you can brave digging into the soil and coming up with that handful of pupated flies. Isn't much. If we were standing in the sun, we would be getting warmer. So if it was May, it was April or May, and these animals were more active and feeding and breeding season was going on, even under these conditions, we would probably see lizards exposed here, okay? And as I said in the lecture, the lizards that we would see would be pretty much really dark. They would be trying to soak up as much as they could. I just want to share one theory I have with you that I've been testing most of my life. You would think that the lizard that is cold is going to be easier to catch, noosing wise or any otherwise, than the lizard that's all warmed up. And in my experience, the opposite is true. And I have a theory as to why. Even though a lizard has a brain that's about half the size of a lentil, if it is cold, it doesn't have the sprint speed, right? And the lizards that are warm are more likely to just wait till the last minute and then take off, because they can go 15 yards like that. But I have more trouble approaching cold lizards because they have a tendency to let me get just a few paces toward them and then they move back down to what their sheltered spot is. So just notice that, if you will. How many of you are likely to noose lizards? Oh, cool. Oh, that's really good. So yeah, particularly with the noosing game. And what you kind of want to do is you tell the kids that, you say, this lizard's cold. That was a little bit too much for a kid. But say you try to catch it and the lizard gets away. It's like, lizard's 1, lizard's 3, David 0, and they just like that kind of thinking around, the game that we are playing. Yes?
I have a question about the young lizards. You were talking about them going underground for the winter.
Yeah.
And they don't have much body mass. Have they still stored enough fat, like in their tail or in their body, to survive the winter?
They don't have much body mass, but they also, again, because they're cold-blooded animals, their body is, their metabolism is going very, very low, so that it sort of goes both ways. They have less tissue to maintain at the same time.
Okay.
So that if they're pretty much shutting down, then they're still going to be able to get to the surface and start feeding in the springtime. Life in a spot like this or greater than just in those open fields, I always take a few extra minutes. This is the kind of place where a rattlesnake can hide over the edge of the footings and get the rodents that are using this space for shelter. Again, you just give yourself a minute here and quickly notice what color this animal is. So I'm going to tell you that, and watch my, I can collapse it. Okay, so one way to tell the boys from the girls is whether there's any blue pigmentation in the dorsal surface. I'm actually going to catch this one because it's really on the move. And this is really interesting. So I would call this, from the top, I would call it a female. Because the light pigment, those really pale gray spots, don't give me any hint of any blue. See, now I'm pulling on this, I'm loosening the noose with this little tag I got here. And when they're girdled, you got to do it like that.
Ooh, very blue. Wow. That's a male, right?
It's a male, and I kind of figured that was going to be the case because I got a little bit of a glimpse.
Wow. And the femoral.
Interesting animal. And
because of the orange on his legs.
Because of the orange in his femoral pores. And it will start to change color, but wow, we're late in the season. So what's going to happen is we're going to get some greens and we're going to get some really nice coloring in there. And that's sort of stress and shock and all that. But here, this is sort of the bigger animal where you can really feel that it's smooth this way and it's spiny that way. And be really gentle. And remember, kids, don't put your hands right in front of its face because these guys can bite you. And it's really scared right now because it thinks it's going to get eaten.
Oh, we're not going to eat you, honey.
Yeah, well,
It's got a lot of green in those.
We're starting to get pigment now. Yeah. But what's happened is the breeding season is over, so this animal's, just like with birds, we're weird in that we're in breeding condition all year round, okay? A lot of animals have massive physiological changes that only happen during the breeding season as a result of testosterone and estrogens and stuff like that. So it is lightening up a bit. But what's happened is this animal has gone completely out of breeding mode, so it isn't very colorful. And remember I talked about the swelling at the base of the tail? So his hemipenes have shrunk all back up. So he's probably no longer sexually potent. But
That's considered a big? Wow.
No, this is a full adult. I wouldn't go with big, but this is the size of an adult fence lizard. A male might be huskier than this. Let me look underneath and see.
This is a male.
This is a male, and you can see the two little crescent-shaped scales that are behind the vent.
Oh yeah. That's
That's it. I mean, everything else is just. Yeah.
Oh, it had its mouth open.
Behind the vent. Do you see how there's two little depressions, and behind those two depressions are two, they look like fingernail scales, there and there.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a boy. And the femoral pores on this animal have also kind of gotten out of condition, so he's no longer producing scent. So I can't get any chalk out of them. But the orange lines, that's where the femoral pores are. Beautiful. And he still has a fair amount of pigment, ventral pigment. But really not as much as he had before. This animal lost its tail. You can see where it lost it and regrew it. It lost it some time ago because not only has the tail completely regenerated, but the scales have grown back onto it. And now,
Where do you see that?
hang on, check this out. And this guy's got some moves. Now we're getting colors. We're getting green. We're getting turquoise in here. Wow. So what was a gray animal? Now I'm getting my dorsal blues.
And that's stress.
It's temperature and stress, and one is caused by the other sometimes. But in an animal in prime breeding condition, they get crazy beautiful. And initially, this was just this gray lizard in my hand.
Wow.
And it's not just going to draw your attention to it. This guy is changing the pigment in his skin while he's in my hand.
You see his eye on the top?
And you can. Wow, it's kind of funny. His
Is it between the eyes?
He's
or is it-
benefiting from the warmth of your hand, too, right?
I don't know if it has any ticks, but the pineal, the third eye. Wow, this guy has a lot of interesting pigment on top
Is
of
it the
his head.
pineal? Is that what the third eye?
God, it's almost invisible on this guy. It would be right here. I could see it better on the babies.
That was interesting.
That little white spot, little lighter spot behind the eyes?
Yeah, the picture they had in the reading that
it's right
we
here,
did
but
was
it's-
almost like right in the middle.
Yeah, this is not a good example of looking at third eye. But again, looking at the change of color, it's still changing
That's your
color.
magnifying glass.
It's not going to help a whole lot. Oh, maybe that's why this guy's color is so off.
You sick?
I literally can barely see it, which is just unusual, but it's really not the showiest character you've ever seen. So let me see if we have any tick load at all. Yeah, there's nymphs. So these are nymphs. Do you see those? So those are
Little black spots?
those little black things.
yeah.
So
Those are the
so
nits?
these so when ticks, I'm really worried about my fiberglass pole being here. So those little black spots haven't been attached for very long. They're still feeding, but they're going to get bigger than that and shinier, and then they're going to drop off of this lizard inside their skin, and then they're going to be the ones that we see that are red and black and on the ends of the grass and walking up and down our pants. So he's got a series of nymphs that are on him right there.
They're calling on you now. Oh no, that's
No, they're attached. That's the thing. They're all attached. And he's got some more that are more engorged on that side.
Yeah.
Do you see the ones on that side? Those guys are larger. They've taken more of
Can
a
we
blood.
move this out of the way for you?
Yeah, that's a good idea. If someone could just hold it up against a tree or something. Thank you very much. So these, they're up this upper fold right there. You'll see they're a little bigger.
Oh,
and
yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
gray.
Oh, definitely.
They're kind of lined up.
Yeah, yeah, I see them.
And so that's not the ear. His ear is right here. Oh, this is kind of a cool thing. I can't do it today, but I'll show you. So in lizards, the tympanum, the eardrum, that's the opening right here, is actually behind the skull case. So it's like relative. That's just down here. And on a sunny day, you can hold the lizard up, and you can have the kids on this side, and you can see light through it. You can pass your finger back and forth behind it. They can see it. So there's actually.
Doesn't have a brain?
Well, no. You can say that you might need to use some mental floss. But it's just kind of cool because on a really bright day. You hold it up and you get just the right angle, and then you can tell by their voices when they can see it, and then you do that, and they can actually see the shadow passing by. But that's because the tympanum, the eardrum, is behind the case, and the auditory bulli, which are the structures that I was looking for earlier, couldn't find. The auditory bulli are farther up in the brain. But God, look at all the color we're getting now.
That's beautiful.
Anyway.
Is every lizard you pick up different? Do you ever see one that looks the same?
I guess every lizard, female, even these spots right here on the dorsal surface. All right, so
I'm surprised how calm it is. That
Look
it's
at the
not
way you hold
trying
them.
to storm and...
it really
It's, he can't move.
Yeah, I've kind of have him in a situation where there's not much he can do about it. When I let it go, you'll see it's going to dash away pretty quick. But we might get in situ shots. And it's kind of funny. There's this technique called nature faking where you find a rock and you pose the lizard on the rock, and then you get your thumb on it like this so that your hand isn't visible. Like if my hand was a rock and I had it anyway, but we don't need to do that today. See, now we have cameras like. You know, I have a relatively small camera that has a 60x optical zoom.
Wow.
So I can get a decent picture of a lizard on that tree trunk without messing with it. But I'll put this guy back. Oh, he was on the picnic table.
But then he went over there when he
Well,
ran.
since we're going to eat, we're going to put him over here. And we might get an in situ shot if I'm gentle.
This little short essay that I'm going to read is written by Scott Carrier. He's an amazing writer. He has a podcast called Home of the Brave, and if you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend it, especially his 3-part series about delisting the Yellowstone grizzly. Really amazing, and I love this because this reminds me of David Herlocker when he was a little kid. So put down pencils. Scott Carrier, C-A-R-R-I-E-R, his best essay book is called Running After Antelope because he and his brother tried to catch antelope at Blaney Gorge Reservoir in the hot, hot sun. It's an amazing story. I won't tell you if they were successful or not. This is called 1963. The hunt begins at dawn, my brother pulling me out of bed onto the floor. Come on, come on! I'm tying my shoes and he's out the door. Outside, the fog is lifting off the grass. I'm looking for my brother, but I can't see the car in the driveway. Then he comes running from the backyard. I jump and run and catch up with him across the street in the Mander's yard. And he says, some animals sleep in the daytime and go out at night to eat. If we hurry, we can catch them before they go back in the ground. I believe him. I have no idea how he knows these things, but he does. He goes out and runs through our neighbors' yards and catches wild animals with his bare hands, mainly lizards, turtles, and snakes. He wraps them in his shirt and brings them back to the cages in the basement so he can study them for science. He is 7 years old. I am 6. I'm running along behind him, and when I lose him in the fog, I follow the tracks he leaves in the dew on the grass. I catch up to him, and he's down on his hands and knees, crawling through the juniper bushes in front of the Gooch's house. He says, there's a garter snake in here. I saw it. It went right in front of me. He's crawling around, breaking branches, and I hear the front door open, and there's our neighbor, Daisy Gooch, in her bathrobe. She looks 10 feet tall and 900 years old, and she says, what's going on out here? I say, there's a snake in your bush? She says, there's no snake. You boys get out of here now. And she starts for us with her broom. We take off running. We don't need to run that far. It's not like she's going to come after us, but we keep running anyway. We jump the fence at Gerholt's house, and we're on the golf course heading toward the gully. My brother says, I think I figured out a way to run and not get tired. It's all in how you breathe. Yesterday I ran over to the gully and down to the river and back, and I didn't get out of breath. I think I can run as far as I want. Like the Indians, I say. Yeah, like the Indians. We have everything we need. The wilderness is unfolding in front of us.